Merca, in the heart of Yuuzhan Vong territory. Voxin Breeding Laboratory.
The scream and roar of combat began to reverberate through the empty groshel, and wisps of battle smoke materialized in the green beams of their helmet lamps. Jacen, now Darth Caedus, he reminded himself, continued to pull into the past. One glove clamped around the arm of Tahiri's pressure suit, the other anchored to the rim of a blaster-pitted gestation bin. The brown stains on the bin's exterior grew wet and red, and crouching forms started to manifest in the surrounding darkness. As he drew more heavily on the Force, the sallow light of the glow-lichen began to shine down through the thickening smoke, revealing the cloning lab in which Jacen's brother, Anakin, had died. Where there had been only barren vacuum a few moments before, now a pulsing jungle of white nutrient vines corkscrewed up the gestation bins that lined the groshel floor. Streaks of color and darkness were flashing past in both directions, the air swirling with razor bugs and the floor shaking with grenade detonations.
"I hope I'm ready for this,"
Tahiri said. Over the suit comm, her voice sounded brittle and uncertain.
"Maybe my first flow walk shouldn't have been into the middle of battle."
Jacen knew it was not the battle that made Tahiri nervous, but he saw no advantage in forcing her to admit it.
"We'll be fine," he said. "We're ghosts here. Even if a Yuuzhan Vong sees us, he can't do us harm." "It's us doing harm that worries me. What if we change something we shouldn't? Something that alters the present?" "That's unlikely."
Actually, Jacen should have said impossible. Any change they made in the past would be corrected by the Force, and the flow would return to its present course.
"I won't let you do anything wrong. Just relax." "Unlikely isn't very relaxing. Not when you're talking about the fate of the galaxy." "Trust me," Jacen said. "I've been flow walking for years, and the galaxy hasn't come to an end yet." "Not that we know of."
Tahiri turned toward the back of the groshel, where Anakin and the rest of the strike team were fighting through a breach in the wall. Their brown jumpsuits were blood-crusted and tattered, and their faces were haggard with fear and exhaustion, yet also tight with anger and resolve. This had been the objective of their mission, the cloning lab where the Yuuzhan Vong created the Voxin that had killed so many Jedi, and they would not leave until it was destroyed. The Force began to hum with Tahiri's anger and sadness, and her hand drifted toward her lightsaber. Jacen could sense how she ached to do more than give Anakin the final kiss she had denied him at the time, how she longed to ignite her weapon and somehow prevent his approaching death. A trio of thermal grenades detonated overhead, filling the dome with orange brilliance and spraying hot shrapnel in all directions. Nutrient vines fell in ropes of fire, and Yuuzhan Vong dropped to the floor in writhing heaps. Tahiri cringed and turned to dive for cover, but Jacen jerked her back. Shrapnel flew past without striking the pair, and flames licked at their pressure suits without melting anything.
"I told you we can't be harmed here," Jacen said. "You also told me it was a coincidence we crossed paths on Anakin's anniversary day. That doesn't mean I believe you."
Jacen frowned behind his visor. "You think I arranged to bump into you?"
"Come on, Jacen. I'm a smart girl."
Jacen hesitated, wondering how much she knew about what he had done a week earlier, whether she had linked their trip here to his aunt's murder on Kavin. It was foolish to think he could kill the wife of Luke Skywalker and avoid discovery indefinitely, yet he had to. Jacen had foreseen that the Confederation's boldness would soon put victory within the Alliance's grasp, but only if the Jedi did not interfere with his plans. After a moment, Jacen said, "Okay, let's say I did arrange it. Why did you come?" "Because I was tempted. And I want to find out what you need from me." "I don't need anything," Jacen lied. "I just thought this might help you move on." "You expect me to believe that?" "It's for Anakin, too," Jacen said. "I think my brother deserves this much. Don't you?" A guilty ripple rolled through the Force. "Not fair. And I still don't believe you." Jacen raised the shoulders of his pressure suit in an awkward shrug. "Does that mean you don't want to go through with this?" Tahiri sighed. "You know better than that."
then you have to trust my instructions, Jacen said. You can't react to the past. The more you become a part of it, the more likely you are to be seen, and the more power it has to harm you. Okay, I understand. It won't happen again. Good.
Jacen turned back to the battle, where the momentary silence that had followed the grenade explosions had been shattered by screaming blaster bolts and droning razor bugs. In the back of the Groshel, Anakin was just rising to his feet as the strike team took advantage of the enemy's disarray to overrun the cloning lab. When Jacen saw his own figure dodging through the battle, he remembered how sad he had been for his wounded brother, how wrong it had seemed for the war to take such a noble young life. It was like watching himself in a home hollow, wondering how he could ever have been so naive. Perhaps once he united the galaxy, such idealism would no longer seem quite so foolish. The boom of a long blaster sounded outside the Groshel. Then a trio of Jedi came rushing inside. The young Tahiri, then just 15, was in the lead. Her blonde hair billowed behind her. The scars suffered during her imprisonment along the Yuuzhan Vong were still red on her forehead. She and the others had barely cleared the breach before a ball of yellow-orange fire followed them inside and exploded. The shockwave hurled the Jedi in 3 different directions, but they quickly used the Force to bring their trajectories under control and come down safely. Young Tahiri tucked herself into a front roll and disappeared behind a gestation bin, then emerged from the other end, returning to her feet. Anakin was already rushing to her side, his free hand cupped over his abdomen, his jaw clenched against the pain of his wound. The voice of the older Tahiri came over the suit comm.
We need to move closer. Fine, but stay in contact with me or the current will carry you off.
Still holding Tahiri's arm, Jacen started toward his brother and the young Tahiri.
And whatever you do, don't open your pressure suit. Our presences are still anchored in our own time, so you'll decompress. Thanks for the warning, but I'd kinda guessed.
Anakin and young Tahiri were now crouching together behind a gestation bin. As Jacen led the way around behind the pair, young Tahiri suddenly raised her arm and pointed across the aisle, toward a scorched bin overflowing with Yuuzhan Vong corpses. Next to the bin, the strike team's meter-high healer, Tekli, stood over the scaly bulk of Tessar Sebatine. She was sprinkling stink salts on the Barabel's forked tongue, trying to rouse him from his unconsciousness, and failing miserably. Jacen continued to lead the way closer, moving very slowly and carefully. Flow walkers tended to cause blurs around themselves, both visually and in the Force, and the slower they moved, the less noticeable the effect would be. As they approached, Anakin pointed toward Tekli and the wounded Barabel.
Take him and go,
he said to young Tahiri.
You may need to cut a way out. You?
She responded.
I'm not going to do it,
Anakin snapped. Her face fell, and even the older Tahiri began to radiate surprise and dismay into the Force. Anakin's tone softened almost as soon as he had spoken.
You need to help Tekli. I'll be along.
Even through a pressure suit's auditory sensors, Anakin's voice sounded weak and anguished, and it was clear that he had known even then he was about to die. A growing tightness began to form in Jacen's throat, and he was surprised at the effort of will required to make it go away. Jacen had loved his brother, and apparently still did, but he could not let his emotions draw him into the past. As he had warned Tahiri, any reaction at all would make them easier to see, and if the other strike team survivors had suddenly started to recall a pair of blurry pressure-suited apparitions at the battle, someone might realize he had flow-walked here with Tahiri, and that would make her useless to him. By the time Jacen had quelled his emotions, Anakin had stood again. He was gently pushing young Tahiri across the aisle toward Tekli, who was kneeling astride Tessar's scaly bulk and trying to slap him awake. The Force grew heavy with older Tahiri's sorrow, but Jacen said nothing to her about the dangers of reacting to the past. He had known all along that she would not be able to control her emotions at this moment. He was counting on it, and he would just have to hope Tekli and the other survivors were too busy with the battle to notice any flow-walking apparitions.
Tessar is not responding,
Tekli said, looking across the aisle.
I cannot move him and work on him both.
Young Tahiri lowered her brow in doubt, clearly suspecting
Sample complete. Ready to continue?